We need you to send $50,000 immediately so your brother can buy a car. He can't be seen driving that old Honda when his little sister just bought a house. My father's text message arrived 3 days after I signed the closing documents on my first home, a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood that I had saved for over 7 years to afford, and not a single member of my family had bothered to congratulate me, attend the signing, or even acknowledge that the daughter they had spent 28 years calling the disappointment had just achieved something none of them ever had. What none of them knew, what they were about to learn in the most dramatic way possible, was that their scapegoat had been keeping secrets of her own, and when the police showed up at my new front door a week later, it wasn't me they were coming to arrest. My name is Simone Blackwell, and this is the story of how buying a house exposed the truth about my family and finally set me free. I need to take you back to the beginning, to a childhood spent in the shadow of a brother who could do no wrong. My brother, Derek Blackwell, was born 3 years before me. From the moment I entered the world, the family dynamics were already set. Derek was the golden child, the heir apparent, the one upon whom all hopes and dreams were projected. I was the afterthought, the oops baby, the one my mother frequently reminded me she hadn't planned for. Derek was handsome, charming, and possessed the kind of confidence that came from being told every day of your life that you were special. He was also lazy, entitled, and fundamentally incapable of taking responsibility for anything. But our parents didn't see that. They saw their perfect son, the one who would carry on the family name, the one who deserved every opportunity, every advantage, every dollar they could scrape together. I was raised on leftovers. Not literally, we weren't poor. My father, Harold Blackwell, was an insurance adjuster who made a comfortable living. My mother, Denise, worked part-time as a receptionist. We had a nice house in the suburbs, took vacations occasionally, lived a solidly middle-class life. But the resources, the attention, the support, the investment, those were reserved for Derek. When Derek wanted to play travel baseball, my parents spent thousands on equipment, fees, and tournament travel. They drove him to every game, cheered from the stands, celebrated every win like he had just made the major leagues. When I wanted to take art classes, I was told we couldn't afford extras. When I brought home drawings from school, my mother would glance at them and say, "That's nice," before turning her attention back to whatever Derek was doing. When Derek struggled in school, my parents hired tutors, met with teachers, advocated fiercely for accommodations. They spent hours helping him with homework, praised every passing grade like it was a scholarship to Harvard. When I struggled, I was told to figure it out because not everyone can be smart like your brother. The irony was that I wasn't struggling because I lacked ability. I was struggling because no one bothered to notice I needed help. When Derek got into a mediocre state college, my parents threw a celebration party and promised to pay his full tuition. There was a cake, balloons, family coming from out of town. When I got into a better school with a partial scholarship, a scholarship I had earned through hours of studying and extracurriculars and building a resume my parents never once helped with, I was told I would have to cover the rest myself because Derek's education is the priority. The message was clear. Derek was the investment. I was the expense. There was one moment that crystallized everything. I was 16, and I had won a regional writing competition. First place, out of over 500 entries. The ceremony was on a Saturday afternoon, and winners would read excerpts from their submissions before receiving their awards. I told my parents about it weeks in advance. I reminded them the morning of. I stood on that stage and scanned the audience, hoping to see their faces. They weren't there. Later, I found out why. Derek had a baseball scrimmage at the same time. Not a tournament, not a championship game, a scrimmage. A practice match that meant nothing. They chose that over my award ceremony. When I got home, still holding my trophy and certificate, my mother barely looked up. "That's nice, honey. Derek almost hit a home run today. He's so talented." I stopped telling them about my accomplishments after that. I learned early that my worth in this family was measured against Derek, and I would always come up short. So, I stopped trying to earn their approval and started building my own life. I worked 2 jobs through college. I graduated with honors, while my brother flunked out after 2 years. I got a good job in marketing while Derek bounced between entrepreneurial ventures that my parents funded and I privately called scams with business cards. By the time I was 25, I had a solid career, a healthy savings account, and a plan. By 28, I had saved enough for a down payment on a house. The house was nothing fancy, a 3-bedroom ranch in a neighborhood of young families and retirees, with a small backyard and a garage that needed work. But it was mine. Entirely mine. Bought with money I had earned, saved by sacrifices I had made, owned by a woman who had never been given anything. I invited my family to the closing. I don't know why. Hope, maybe. Some desperate, childish part of me that still believed they might finally be proud of something I accomplished. That they might finally see me as someone worthy of celebration. My mother's response: "We're busy that day. Derek has a meeting with investors." Derek's investors were actually my parents, who were giving him another $30,000 to start another doomed business. But I didn't know that at the time. My father's response: nothing. He didn't even bother to reply. Derek's response: a laughing emoji, followed by "must be nice to have no life and nothing better to spend money on." I went to the closing alone. The title company representative smiled warmly as I signed document after document. "Big day," she said. "Is anyone meeting you afterward to celebrate?" "Just me," I said, keeping my voice light. "I'm taking myself out to dinner." She looked at me with something like understanding. "Well, congratulations. This is a huge accomplishment. You should be proud." I was proud, but I was also heartbroken, and the combination felt like swallowing glass. 3 days after the closing, my father texted. I was at the house, unpacking boxes and trying to decide where to put my furniture. My phone buzzed, and when I saw Dad on the screen, my heart lifted despite everything. Maybe he was finally reaching out. Maybe he wanted to congratulate me. Instead, I read, "We need you to send $50,000 immediately so your brother can buy a car. He can't be seen driving that old Honda when his little sister just bought a house. It would be embarrassing for the family. Transfer the money to my account by Friday." I stared at the message for a long time. $50,000. For a car. For Derek. Because my success was embarrassing to him. Not "congratulations on your house." Not "we're proud of you." Not even "how are you settling in." Just, "give your brother money so he doesn't feel bad about himself." Something inside me snapped. Not dramatically, not with tears or rage. Just a quiet, final click like a lock turning shut. I opened Venmo and sent my father exactly $1. The note read, "For gas." Then I blocked his number. Then I blocked my mother's number. Then I blocked Derek's number. Then I called a locksmith and had every lock in my new house changed, even though no one in my family had ever been given a key. For 4 days, I lived in blissful silence. I unpacked my belongings. I arranged my furniture. I hung pictures on walls that belonged to me. I cooked dinner in my own kitchen and slept in my own bedroom and woke up each morning in a house that no one could take from me. I didn't miss them. That surprised me. I had spent my whole life trying to earn their love, and now that I had finally stopped, I felt nothing but relief. On the 5th day, Derek showed up. I was in the backyard, measuring for a garden bed I wanted to install, when I heard banging on my front door. Not knocking, banging. Aggressive, demanding, entitled. I walked through the house and looked through the peephole. Derek stood on my porch, red-faced and furious. Behind him, I could see his Honda, the one that was apparently too embarrassing to drive, parked crookedly at the curb. "Simone, open this door. I know you're in there." I could have ignored him. Probably should have. But something in me wanted to face this, to see it through to whatever end was coming. I opened the door, but kept the chain on. "What do you want, Derek?" "What do I want? Are you serious?" He tried to push the door open and was stopped by the chain. His face twisted with frustration. "You sent Dad $1. $1. With a note that said "for gas." Do you think that's funny?" I thought it was appropriate. He asked you for $50,000. He demanded $50,000. For you. So you could buy a car. Because apparently my buying a house was too embarrassing for the family to tolerate unless you got a consolation prize. That's not, Derek sputtered. That's not how it is. I deserve that car. I've been working hard on my business, and I need reliable transportation to meet with clients. What clients, Derek? Your business is selling cryptocurrency to your parents. That's not a business. That's an allowance with extra steps. His face went even redder. You don't know anything about what I'm building. I know you've never held a job for more than 6 months. I know Mom and Dad have given you over $200,000 since you dropped out of college. I know you've never paid them back a dime, and they've never asked you to. I kept my voice calm, factual. And I know that I've worked for everything I have while you've coasted on their favoritism. That's not true. They love us both equally. They didn't come to my closing, Derek. I bought a house, the first person in our family to ever own property, and they didn't bother to show up because you had a meeting with investors. Mom and Dad are your investors. They chose giving you more money over celebrating my achievement. Something flickered in Derek's expression. Not shame. I don't think he was capable of shame, but maybe recognition that his usual tactics weren't working. Look, he said, shifting to a more conciliatory tone. I understand you're upset, but we're family. Family helps each other out. And Dad is really angry about that $1 thing. Like really angry. If you just apologize and send the money.
No.
Simone.
No.
I'm not apologizing. I'm not sending money. And I'm not going to keep being the family ATM while being treated like the family disappointment. I started to close the door. Goodbye, Derek. He stuck his foot in the gap. You can't just cut us off. Mom is crying. Dad says if you don't send the money by Friday, he's going to... Going to what? Derek's mouth opened and closed. He hadn't thought that far ahead. That's what I thought. I pushed his foot back and closed the door. Don't come here again. I heard him yelling through the door for another few minutes, then his car starting, then silence. I went back to measuring for my garden bed. The police arrived 2 days later. It was Saturday morning, and I was enjoying my first cup of coffee in my own home when I heard a knock at the door. Not banging this time, a firm, official knock. Through the peephole, I saw 2 uniformed officers. My stomach dropped. Had Derek done something? Had my parents called in some kind of wellness check to harass me? I opened the door. Can I help you? Ms. Blackwell? Simone Blackwell. Yes. I'm Officer Daniels. This is Officer Porter. We're from the Financial Crimes Unit. May we come in and ask you a few questions? Financial crimes. Not a wellness check. Not a complaint about family drama. Financial crimes. Of course. I stepped back and let them in. What's this about? Officer Daniels pulled out a notepad. Are you related to Derek Blackwell and Harold Blackwell? Derek is my brother. Harold is my father. When was the last time you had contact with them? My father texted me 5 days ago. My brother came to my house 2 days ago. I've blocked both of them since then. The officers exchanged a look. Ms. Blackwell, has anyone in your family ever asked you to participate in any business ventures? Investment opportunities? Anything involving money transfers? My father asked me to send $50,000 to my brother. I refused. Has anyone asked you to sign any documents, open any accounts, or provide your personal information for business purposes?
No. Why?
What's going on? Officer Daniels hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. We're investigating your father and brother for wire fraud, money laundering, and identity theft. We have evidence that they've been running an investment scam for the past 3 years, defrauding dozens of victims out of several $1,000,000. The words didn't compute. That's not possible. My father is an insurance adjuster. My brother is, well, my brother is an idiot, frankly, but he's not a criminal. Your father was an insurance adjuster. He was fired 4 years ago for claims fraud. He's been running this scheme full-time since then, with your brother as his partner. Officer Porter pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot. Do you recognize this website? It was slick and professional, advertising guaranteed returns on cryptocurrency investments. At the bottom was a logo, Blackwell Capital Partners. I've never seen this before. Your brother claims you're a silent partner. He says you provided the initial capital and have been receiving monthly distributions. He gave U.S. bank records showing transfers to an account in your name. The room spun. That's not true. I've never given them money for any business. I've never received any distributions. I don't even have a relationship with them. We believe you, Ms. Blackwell. The account in question was opened with a stolen identity, yours. We found forged documents with your signature. Officer Danielle's voice softened slightly. It appears your family has been using your name and credit to facilitate their scheme for some time. We're here to get your statement and to warn you that you may need legal representation. Wait, my mind was racing. You said they've been using my credit? For how long? For what? Our investigation suggests at least 2 years. They opened business credit cards in your name, took out a loan using your identity, and have been listing you as a co-owner of the company to add legitimacy. I didn't know about any of this. I had no idea. We believe you. Your credit reports show the fraudulent accounts, but your genuine financial records show a completely different pattern: consistent employment, responsible spending, regular savings. It's clear you weren't involved. I sat down heavily on my new couch in my new house that I had bought with money I had earned honestly. They were using me this whole time. Even while they were ignoring me, dismissing me, treating me like I didn't matter, they were using my name to steal from people. It appears so, yes. And when my father demanded $50,000, we think he was trying to get more capital into the scheme, or possibly to get you more deeply implicated, so that if everything fell apart, you would share the blame. I laughed. It came out broken and bitter. Of course, that's what it was. They couldn't even ask me for money without trying to trap me. The investigation took months. I cooperated fully with the police, provided every document and record they requested, and testified before a grand jury about my family's treatment of me and my complete lack of involvement in their crimes. The detectives assigned to my case, Daniels and Porter, became almost like allies over the months of investigation. They kept me informed of developments, warned me when things were about to become public, and made sure I had resources to deal with the media attention that eventually came. Because it did become public. A Ponzi scheme targeting retirees and young families, run by a seemingly normal suburban family. It was catnip for local news. Then regional news. Then a podcast about financial crimes did an episode. Then a true crime YouTube channel. I became the daughter who turned them in. Which wasn't exactly true. I hadn't known about the crimes until the police arrived, but it made for a better story. Journalists wanted interviews. True crime enthusiasts wanted details. Strangers on the internet had opinions about my family and, by extension, about me. I said no to all of it. I had cooperated with law enforcement, and I would testify at trial, but I wasn't going to become a public figure in my own family's destruction. The scope of what my father and brother had done was staggering. They had defrauded 47 victims out of a combined $3.2 million. They had promised guaranteed returns of 30% or more on cryptocurrency investments, then used new investors' money to pay fake returns to earlier investors, a classic Ponzi scheme dressed up in blockchain buzzwords. The victims were heartbreaking to learn about. A retired couple who had invested their entire savings based on my father's guaranteed returns. A young teacher who had given her first year's salary, hoping to get ahead. A widow who had lost her husband's life insurance payout to promises of financial security. Each story hit me like a physical blow. These weren't abstract victims. They were real people whose lives my family had destroyed. My mother, it turned out, knew everything. She had helped manage the books, had lied to investors who called the house, had been complicit from the beginning. The part-time receptionist job she still claimed to have, that had ended years ago. She had been working full-time on the scam. I thought about all the times she had told me we couldn't afford things. Art classes, a dress for prom, help with college tuition. She had been choosing to deprive me while actively helping steal millions from strangers. The identity theft against me was just the tip of the iceberg. They had also stolen identities from neighbors, distant relatives, and even some of their own victims to create fake accounts and business entities. They had been living large on stolen money while telling me we couldn't afford art classes. They had looked me in the eye and said I wasn't worth investing in while they were using my name to invest stolen funds. The hypocrisy was almost too enormous to comprehend. The trial was the hardest part. I had to testify against my own family. I sat in a courtroom and answered questions about my childhood, about the favoritism, about the $50,000 demand. I looked at my mother crying in the gallery and felt nothing. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Angela Moreno, had prepared me thoroughly. She walked me through every question she would ask, every question the defense might ask, every trap they might try to set. She became another unexpected ally in a process I had never imagined being part of. When I took the stand, Derek stared at me with pure hatred. My father wouldn't look at me at all. My mother kept crying, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, playing the victim even as evidence of her guilt was presented to the jury. Ms. Blackwell, the prosecutor asked, "Did you ever authorize anyone to open financial accounts in your name?"
No.
"Did you ever agree to be a partner or investor in any business with your father or brother?"
No.
"Did you receive any money from the scheme known as Blackwell Capital Partners?" "Not knowingly. I've since learned that money was deposited into an account opened fraudulently in my name, but I never had access to that account and never received any of those funds." "When your father texted you demanding $50,000, what did you understand that to mean?" "I understood it to be another example of my family's pattern of extracting resources from me while giving nothing in return. I didn't know at the time that it was connected to any criminal enterprise." The cross-examination was brutal. Derek's lawyer tried to paint me as a scorned daughter seeking revenge. He asked about my estrangement from the family, implying that I had cut them off long before the crimes were discovered. He suggested that my testimony was motivated by jealousy over my brother's success. "Ms. Blackwell, isn't it true that you've always resented your brother?" "I've resented being treated as less valuable than my brother, yes. That's not the same as resenting him personally. And isn't it possible that this resentment has colored your testimony? That you're exaggerating or even fabricating your lack of involvement?"
No.
"The financial records show clearly that I had no access to the fraudulent accounts. My legitimate finances show a completely different pattern from the scheme's operations. The facts support my testimony, regardless of how I feel about my family." "But you admit you have negative feelings toward your family?" "I have negative feelings toward being treated as less than my entire life, while simultaneously having my identity stolen to commit crimes." "I think most people would." The jury seemed to appreciate my directness. Derek tried to claim I was the mastermind. His lawyer presented a theory that I had orchestrated everything and was now framing my family to steal their assets. It was so absurd that even the jury seemed offended by it. The prosecution presented evidence that destroyed Derek's credibility: recordings of him bragging about the scheme to investors he was trying to impress, text messages coordinating with my father, financial records showing exactly where all the money had gone. A significant portion had gone to cars, watches, and vacations. My father had bought a boat. My mother had spent $40,000 on jewelry. Derek had funded a lifestyle that included bottle service at clubs and weekends in Vegas. Meanwhile, they had been telling me they couldn't afford to help with my education, couldn't come to my house closing, couldn't acknowledge any of my achievements. The verdicts came on a Thursday. Harold Blackwell, guilty on all counts, sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Denise Blackwell, guilty on conspiracy and money laundering, sentenced to 5 years. Derek Blackwell, guilty on all counts plus additional charges of witness tampering for trying to frame me, sentenced to 15 years. I watched them being led away in handcuffs. My mother was crying. My father was stone-faced. Derek was still trying to talk his way out of it, insisting there had been a mistake, that he would appeal, that this wasn't over. It was over. In the aftermath, I had to repair the damage they had done to my identity and credit. The fraudulent accounts were closed. The stolen identity was flagged with all 3 credit bureaus. I spent months filling out paperwork, disputing charges, and documenting every instance of fraud. The bank account they had opened in my name, the one where they claimed to be sending me distributions, was seized as evidence. It turned out to be empty. They had moved the money out as fast as it came in. But there was one unexpected development. The victims of my family's fraud filed a civil lawsuit. As part of the settlement, any assets recovered from the Blackwells would be distributed to the victims. This included my parents' house, their cars, the boat, the jewelry, everything they had bought with stolen money. It also included a life insurance policy my father had taken out years ago, which named my mother as the primary beneficiary and me as the contingent beneficiary. With my mother in prison and convicted of the same crimes, she was legally barred from collecting. The policy, worth $500,000, came to me. I donated every penny to the fraud victims. It wasn't legally required. The victim's attorney told me I could keep it, that I was a victim too, that no one would blame me for taking something back after what my family had put me through. But that money was built on suffering. It was purchased with premiums paid from stolen funds, maintained as part of a lifestyle financed by fraud.
I didn't want it.
The donation was anonymous. The victims never knew it came from me. But I knew, and that was enough. 3 years have passed since the trial. I still live in my 3-bedroom ranch, the one I bought with money I earned honestly, the one no one in my family came to celebrate. I've painted the walls, planted the garden, made it into a home that feels entirely mine. I've built a good life. I got promoted twice at work. I started a side business doing freelance marketing consulting. I adopted a dog named Cooper who greets me at the door every evening like I'm the most important person in the world. The house has become my sanctuary. I've made improvements over the years. The garden I always wanted, a reading nook in the sunroom, a home office where I run my consulting business. Every change I make is a reminder that this space is mine, built by my own effort, untouched by my family's poison. Sometimes, late at night, I walk through the rooms and marvel at how different my life has become. The girl who was told she wasn't worth art classes now has an art studio in her spare bedroom. The young woman who had to fund her own education now has savings and investments that would have seemed impossible to my teenage self. The daughter, who has never celebrated, now celebrates herself, unapologetically and often. I've also found a family, not the one I was born into, but the one I chose. My friend Vanessa, who brought me dinner every night during the trial preparation. She showed up without being asked, with home-cooked meals and wine, and the ability to make me laugh, even when I felt like I would never laugh again. She had come from her own difficult family background and understood, in ways others couldn't, what it meant to rebuild your life without the foundation you were supposed to have. My neighbor Patricia, a retired teacher who invited me to join her book club and has become something like a surrogate mother. She noticed me working in my garden one afternoon, came over to compliment my tomatoes, and somehow that turned into weekly dinners and holiday celebrations and the kind of maternal warmth I had never experienced. When I told her about my family, the whole story, she hugged me and said, "You deserved so much better. But you're going to have it now." My boyfriend Marcus, who never met my biological family and knows them only through my stories, and who tells me regularly that their inability to see my worth says everything about them and nothing about me. He came into my life 18 months after the trial, when I had finally started believing I might be ready to trust someone again. He's patient with my moments of doubt, proud of my accomplishments, and completely uninterested in the drama of my past. "I care about who you are now," he told me early on. The rest is just backstory. These people, Vanessa, Patricia, Marcus, and others I've collected along the way, are my real family.
They chose me.
They see me. They celebrate my successes and support me through my struggles without keeping score, without conditions, without making me feel like I owe them for basic human kindness. That's what family is supposed to feel like. I just had to lose my biological family to find it. I don't speak to my parents or my brother. My mother wrote me letters from prison. Long, tear-stained letters full of excuses and blame-shifting and requests for forgiveness. She claimed she didn't know about the identity theft, that my father manipulated her, that she was just trying to keep the family together. I returned them all unopened. My father wrote once, a single page demanding that I pay for his appeal attorney. He called it my obligation since I had benefited from the family my whole life. The lack of self-awareness was almost impressive. I shredded it. Derek hasn't written. According to prison records I accessed through a victim's notification system, He's been in trouble multiple times for trying to run scams on other inmates. Some people never learn. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice, cutting them off so completely. Then I remember, they used my name to steal millions of dollars. They tried to frame me for their crimes. They spent my entire life treating me as less than while simultaneously exploiting my identity for their benefit. They were never really my family. They were just people who shared my DNA and took everything they could from me until I finally stopped letting them. Last month, I got an email from the Victims Advocacy Organization. They were holding a gathering for the people my family had defrauded, a support group of sorts, a chance to connect and heal together. They invited me to attend, not as a perpetrator's family member, but as a fellow victim. I almost said no. I wasn't sure I wanted to face the people my family had hurt, even though I had hurt none of them myself. I worried they might blame me for not seeing the signs, not stopping it, not somehow preventing the damage my family had caused. Marcus encouraged me to go. "You need this," he said. "You need to see that you're not alone, and you need to let them see that not everyone in that family was a monster." So I went. The gathering was held in a community center on a Saturday afternoon. Folding chairs arranged in a circle. Coffee and pastries on a side table. A facilitator from the organization who specialized in financial crime trauma. The room was full of ordinary people. Retirees who had lost their savings. Young couples who had invested their wedding funds. A single mother who had given her children's college money to my father's fake fund. A small business owner who had invested his company's reserves. They went around the circle, sharing their stories. Each one was devastating in its own way. A woman in her 70s who had been widowed and invested her husband's life insurance based on my father's personal guarantee of safety. She lost everything and now lived with her adult daughter, dependent in a way she had spent her whole life trying to avoid. A young couple who had invested their down payment savings, hoping to grow the money enough to afford a house. They were now back to square one, years of saving erased by my family's greed. A retired pastor who had recommended the investment to members of his congregation, trusting my father because he seemed like such a nice family man. He had lost not only his own money but also his reputation and many of his relationships. I listened to each story with growing horror. These weren't abstract statistics. They were real people whose lives my family had devastated. When it was my turn, I wasn't sure what to say. "My name is Simone," I started. "I'm Harold's daughter, Derek's sister." The room tensed. I didn't know about what they were doing until the police told me. I found out the same week I bought my first house, the house I had spent 7 years saving for while they were stealing millions. I told them about the favoritism, the neglect, the $50,000 demand. I told them about the identity theft, the fraudulent accounts in my name, the attempt to frame me. I told them that I had cooperated fully with the investigation and testified against my own family. "I know that doesn't fix anything," I said. "Nothing can fix what they did to you. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. Not sorry on their behalf. They don't deserve anyone speaking for them. But sorry that you were hurt. Sorry that my family caused you pain. Sorry that people you trusted turned out to be monsters." I stood in the back, trying to be invisible, until a woman approached me. "You're Simone, aren't you?" The daughter who testified. I tensed, waiting for anger, for blame, for the accusation that I should have known, should have stopped it, should have done something. Instead, she hugged me. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for telling the truth. Thank you for not protecting them." One by one, others came forward. They thanked me for cooperating with the investigation. They told me they understood. I was a victim too. They said they were sorry for what my family had put me through. An older man, a retired firefighter who had lost his entire pension to my father's scheme, shook my hand and said, "I've got 2 sons. I'd be proud if either of them turned out like you." I cried for the first time since the trial. Not from sadness, but from something else. Something like healing. Something like finally being seen. My family never congratulated me for buying a house. They demanded $50,000 for my brother instead. When I refused, they tried to implicate me in their crimes. When that failed, they tried to frame me entirely. But they're in prison now, and I'm free. I'm free in ways that have nothing to do with physical location. Free from the endless pursuit of approval that was never coming. Free from the competition I never wanted to be part of. Free from the identity I was assigned, the disappointment, the afterthought, the less than. I'm Simone Blackwell. I own a house. I have a career I built myself. I have friends who actually care about me and a dog who thinks I'm perfect. And I have something my family never gave me and can never take away. A life that belongs entirely to me. At my first house signing, no one came. 3 days later, they demanded money. A week later, the police arrived. And now, 3 years later, I finally understand. The family who ignored my achievements was the same family who was secretly destroying my credit. The people who couldn't celebrate my success were using my identity to fund their crimes. The parents who said I was less than my brother were treating my entire existence as a resource to be exploited. I was never the disappointment. They were. And now they have 15 years to think about it.